Hello and welcome to this next video on mobile repairing. We've been trying to understand the chip level components on a mobile PCB in these videos. In the earlier video, we tried understanding three important components, namely resistor, capacitor and transistor. Moving on, let's also try and understand another type of capacitor, which is called the MFD capacitor or MFD condenser. This is also otherwise called as an electrolytic condenser and is polarized. By polarized, what I mean is that this has a positive and a negative end and has to be connected appropriately to the positive and negative terminal. In the earlier type of capacitor that we saw in the previous video, there were no positive or negative terminals. They were called simple condensers, whereas here you will have something called as an electrolytic condenser or capacitor, which will have a positive and negative end. So, this is the electrolytic condenser or capacitor, as you can see here. It is in yellow color and has a dark brown line on one end of the condenser. So, as you can see, this condenser ensures that it is able to filter out unwanted DC signals when they are being passed in the circuit, and sometimes can hold the charge or electricity for a short period of time. Now, on one end you will see the dark brown line on one end, and that signifies the positive terminal of the condenser. The other end will be the negative terminal. So, where you see the dark brown line is how you identify the polarity of these condensers. And when you are placing these on a PCB, you need to ensure that you align the polarities correctly so that there is no fault in its functioning on a PCB. The terminals are placed on the right side and the left side of each of these points and need to be soldered onto a PCB for it to function effectively. So, this condenser is a very critical component, and most electrolytic condensers or polarized electrolytic condensers typically have two main functions. One is to charge up and discharge, such as when you need to use a flash. This capacitor or condenser is what stores a short burst of energy and releases it to the flash to function effectively. This also functions as a way to filter out unwanted DC signals and ensure that there is smooth flow of voltage or current through the circuit. So, if you need to compare this to a simple condenser, the biggest difference is in a simple condenser acts as a way of ensuring that the voltage or current is supplied from one point to the other point, and simple condensers can be placed in any direction. They are not polarized and can be placed in any direction. However, electrolytic condensers usually are able to store a little bit of charge and release it at one burst, and can also function as filters to ensure that there is smooth flow of DC voltage in the circuit. And electrolytic condensers are typically polarized and need to be placed with the right positive and negative ends to ensure that the electricity or voltage flow is smooth or consistent across the entire PCB. Typically, MFD condensers are slightly larger in size, and most capacitors are measured in units of microfarads. There are also smaller units such as picofarad and nanofarads that are available for smaller capacitors. Now, let us move on to another important component on a mobile PCB, which is otherwise called as an IC. IC basically stands for integrated circuits. Integrated circuits, and as the name says, have circuits integrated into the component, and these circuits are complex circuits which do multiple functions on a mobile PCB. And these integrated circuits are common across electronic devices these days and have a very strong history, starting from transistors to very small ICs that are currently being used in multiple devices. These ICs have been the reason for miniaturization of many devices. You may recall that when mobile phones were launched, the size of those phones were really huge. But today, you can actually get excellent mobile phones which can fit into the palm of your hand, and such miniaturization has been possible only because of the smaller size ICs that have come into existence these days. These ICs perform multiple functions on mobile PCBs, thereby enabling the mobile to function or offer you a lot of functionalities compared to ancient mobile phones. Now, there are two types of ICs which are commonly seen. The first type of IC is called a lead IC and the second is called as a ball IC. Now, we spoke about it very briefly in one of the earlier videos, but in order to clarify, let us try and see what a lead IC looks like. For example, what you see now is a lead IC. A lead IC basically has leads extending out of both sides of the IC. So, these leads are connected to the circuit board, thereby ensuring that there is data or electricity that is transmitted from one end to the other end. The other type of IC that we will see is called as a ball IC. A ball IC typically has small minute balls which are placed at the back of the IC to connect these ICs to the PCBs. As you can see, they are really minute, and these balls act as connecting points for the IC to connect to the circuit in the PCB. Essentially, the lead or the ball are the ways through which the IC communicates with the mobile PCB. In a PCB also, you will be able to see that there are multiple ICs which are placed, and each IC will have very specific functions. Some ICs are related to network, some ICs are related to your power section. You can very clearly see that this is a lead IC which is connected by LEDs on all the sides. These ICs essentially are able to take in data, give out data, can take in power, give out power depending on its function in the entire PCB. While you are working on repairing mobile phones, many a times you may need to replace some ICs if you find that there is a problem with a particular IC. In those cases, you need to ensure that you identify the right IC and pick it up from the market before you can replace it in its position. Many a times, if ICs are not available, you may have to replace it from any other non-working mobile phone where that particular IC is still functional. However, with the current cost of ICs, many a times it will probably be more sensible to actually replace the mobile phone instead of actually replacing the IC in the mobile phone itself. But ICs are very clearly identified. If you look through the circuit diagram of these mobile phones, you will be able to clearly understand what kind of IC and what is the specification of each IC. Using those specifications, you can go ahead and pick up the respective IC and replace those ICs on the mobile PCB. The process of replacing these ICs is explained in one of the future videos where you will learn how you can remove an IC from the PCB and how you can replace an IC onto the mobile circuit board. Moving on, let's understand one other important component in a mobile PCB. This is called a coil. A coil, as the name signifies, is basically a coil of wire which is rolled into a very small component. Normally, you will not find many coils on mobile PCBs. Older PCBs or older mobiles sometimes have coils in them, whereas nowadays you may not be able to see coils as much in the modern mobile phones. Let's see how a coil looks like. And if you look closer, these are how coils look like. They are very distinct by the color of the particular component. As you can see, this is a violet blue color with two white lines on the side, and this signifies that this is a coil. So, a coil's primary function is to delay the flow of electricity from one point to the other point. The difference between this and a resistor is very clear. A resistor basically resists the flow of current, and while resisting the flow of current, it emits electricity, or some amount of electricity which is wasted because of the resistance is emitted as heat. Whereas here there is no loss of electricity, it primarily acts as a delay component to delay the flow of electricity from one point to the other point. Sometimes it may also reduce the voltage sometimes and incorporate a time delay in the movement of power from one point to the other point on a mobile PCB. The coils also usually do not have a positive and negative terminal in them and can be placed in any direction as you want. In order to check a coil, you can use the beep continuity test on the multimeter to see if a particular coil is functional or non-functional. So, in the last two videos, we have tried understanding some of the components that are placed on a mobile PCB. In this video, we tried understanding about an electrolytic condenser along with a little bit of information about ICs as well as another important component called a coil, which are placed on a mobile PCB. Going forward, we will continue to understand a few more components on the chip level on a mobile PCB in the next set of videos. Thank you very much.